The city had a strange kind of silence that night, one that didn't come from peace but from something breaking inside me. The streets, once alive with noise and movement, felt emptied of meaning, as if they too had grown tired of witnessing the same familiar faces drift through them without purpose. I walked slowly, almost dragging each step, feeling the weight of every memory she and I had built over the years pressing down on my shoulders. It was strange how the same places that once held our laughter now seemed to echo with nothing but absence. I kept replaying everything in my mind, our conversations, the warmth we once shared, the tiny moments that had felt permanent. But somewhere along the way, without either of us noticing, those moments had started slipping away. The connection between us had weakened like a thread stretched too far. We weren't fighting with words anymore, we were fighting with distance, with silence, with the kind of coldness that doesn't need to be spoken to be understood. And yet, even as she drifted further, I kept trying to hold on. Maybe I was too afraid to accept that love can die softly, without noise, without warning. Maybe I thought that if I stood still long enough, if I stayed calm, she might turn back. But every passing day made it clearer, this wasn't the beginning of a fight. It was the beginning of an ending. The city kept moving, cars rushing by, people lost in their own worlds, but inside me everything felt paused. I had become a shadow walking beside old memories, trying to understand where things truly fell apart. And deep down, I already knew, the silence between us wasn't new. It had been growing for a long time, and tonight, it finally felt real. Our conversations had stopped feeling like conversations a long time ago. Instead of speaking to each other, we spoke around each other, carefully, cautiously, as if every word might trigger something neither of us wanted to face. The warmth that once lived in her voice had faded into a tone so neutral it felt like a wall. I could sense the distance growing, not through arguments or loud moments, but through the quiet spaces where she no longer reached for me, no longer tried to understand what was happening inside me. It was a slow drift, the kind that hurts more than any fight ever could. She would sit beside me, scrolling through her phone, pretending to be busy, pretending not to notice the storm behind my silence. And I would pretend not to notice the way her eyes avoided mine. It was strange how two people could share the same room, breathe the same air, yet feel continents apart. The tension was invisible, but it was everywhere, between sentences, between footsteps, between the moments where a simple touch could have changed everything but never came. Every night, I lay awake replaying her words, her tone, her small sighs of frustration, searching for clues. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was hurt. Or maybe she had already accepted something I was refusing to acknowledge. I tried to talk, tried to bridge the gap, but the connection felt fragile, like one wrong word could shatter it completely. And still, despite everything, I told myself it was just a phase. That all relationships go through it. But deep inside, an uncomfortable truth was forming. We weren't just losing communication, we were losing each other. And neither of us knew how to stop it. There came a day when the truth struck me harder than any argument ever had. We were becoming strangers while still sharing the same life. It didn't happen suddenly, it was a slow erosion, the kind you only notice once the damage is already done. I would look at her and search for the girl I once knew, the girl who used to laugh without hesitation, who used to look at me as if I mattered. But now her eyes carried a distance I couldn't cross, no matter how close I sat beside her. It felt like watching someone you love walk deeper into a fog, and all you can do is stand there hoping they'll turn back. We tried maintaining routines, doing the same things we once loved, but everything felt hollow. Conversations became rehearsed, smiles forced, touch avoided. There were moments when her silence felt louder than any scream, moments where I could feel her drifting so far that I wondered if I had ever truly known her at all. I would study her face, her expressions, trying to decode the reason for the growing emptiness, but all I found were more questions, questions she never answered, questions I wasn't brave enough to ask. I could feel her preparing to leave long before she ever admitted it. The little changes gave her away, the way she stopped sharing her day, the way she hesitated before saying I'm fine, the way she no longer reached for me when something hurt. It was like standing in a house that was quietly burning from the inside while pretending the warmth was normal. And I, stubborn and scared, kept trying to hold the pieces together, even though everything around us was already breaking. Deep down, I knew she wasn't just drifting away, she was slipping beyond reach. I kept trying to fix what was falling apart, even when every sign around me said it was already too late. I changed my tone, softened my words, tried to be more patient, more understanding, more gentle, anything to hold on to what remained of us. Every day felt like a test where I kept failing, not because I wasn't trying, but because she had already made a decision she wasn't ready to speak aloud. Still, I kept hoping that if I just tried a little harder, she might notice, she might stay, she might remember the version of us that once felt unbreakable. There were nights when I sat beside her, waiting for her to open up, waiting for her to tell me what she truly felt. But she spoke in half sentences, in vague replies, in tired expressions that said more than her words ever did. The distance wasn't just emotional anymore, it was physical. She sat farther away, leaned less, avoided touch as if it carried a weight she didn't want to feel. I caught her staring into nothing, lost in thoughts she never shared, and every time I asked if she was okay, she gave me the same quiet "I'm fine" that fooled neither of us. I tried to revive us in small ways, little gestures, small acts of affection, moments of effort, but it felt like pouring water into a cracked glass. Nothing stayed. Nothing healed. Sometimes she looked at me with a heaviness in her eyes, like she wanted to speak but couldn't. And I knew, deep down, that she wasn't struggling with us anymore, she was struggling with how to leave. I kept fighting for something she had already given up on, and every attempt I made only highlighted the truth I didn't want to face. Love wasn't the problem anymore, letting go was. The day she finally said the words felt strangely calm on the outside, as if the world had no idea that something inside me was tearing apart. She looked at me with a seriousness I had never seen before, a quiet certainty that made my chest tighten before she even spoke. And then, with a voice that didn't tremble, she said the sentence that I had secretly feared for months, "We should part ways." For a moment, everything around us seemed to stop. I didn't hear the sound of traffic outside, didn't feel the air in the room, just a dull, heavy silence pressing against my ears. I had imagined this moment before, but imagination never came close to the reality of hearing the person you love choose a world without you. My heart didn't break with a loud shatter, it cracked quietly, like something fragile finally giving in after holding too much weight for too long. She waited for a reaction, maybe expecting anger, confusion, or an argument. But I didn't give her any of that. I nodded slowly, forcing a small smile, the kind people make when they're pretending they're okay. I think that hurt more than anything else, knowing that even in the end, I didn't want to make things harder for her. That even in my breaking, I wanted her to feel lighter. Inside, though, a storm was rising. Memories rushed through me, our first laughs, our late-night talks, the way she used to hold my hand without hesitation. All of it felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. I wanted to ask why, wanted to plead for one more chance, but the words never came. Maybe because I already knew the answer. Sometimes love doesn't end with dramatic scenes or final fights. Sometimes it ends quietly, with a soft exhale and two people letting go. And that day, I let her go even if a part of me never would. After she left, the world didn't break the way I expected it to, it just turned hollow. The room felt bigger, emptier, as if her absence had pushed the walls farther apart. There were traces of her everywhere, the faint scent on the pillow, the small things she once touched, the quiet spaces she used to fill without even trying. I would wake up in the middle of the night expecting to hear her breathing beside me, only to be met with a silence so heavy it felt like a weight on my chest. Nights became longer, stretching endlessly as I lay staring at the ceiling, drowning in thoughts I couldn't escape. People say heartbreak is emotional, but mine felt physical. Every breath hurt. Every memory hit like a bruise being pressed again and again. I walked through my days in a haze, going to work, talking to people, pretending everything was fine, while inside, something was collapsing. Friends tried to talk, tried to pull me out of it, but heartbreak has a way of isolating you even in a crowded room. It creates a private ache no one else can understand, a quiet loneliness that follows you everywhere. I kept replaying moments with her, wondering where things went wrong, telling myself maybe I could have done more, maybe if I had loved harder, listened better, been different, she wouldn't have walked away. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Sometimes two people just stop fitting together, no matter how tightly they try to hold on. Accepting that truth felt like swallowing glass. Time didn't heal anything in those early weeks. If anything, it sharpened the pain, making every small reminder unbearable. Her name, her favorite song, even strangers who look like her, it all hit me like waves I couldn't outrun. And in that overwhelming emptiness, I realized something painfully simple. Losing her didn't just take away a person, it took away the version of me that existed with her. Months passed in slow, uneven rhythms, each day blending into the next as I tried to rebuild myself piece by piece. I learned how to live without checking my phone for her messages, how to sleep without waiting for her goodnight, how to breathe without the constant ache in my chest. I wasn't healed, far from it, but I had learned to carry the pain differently. It stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a scar I was learning to live with. I convinced myself that her chapter was closed, that life had quietly moved forward even if my heart sometimes lingered behind. And then, one ordinary afternoon, everything shifted again. I heard her voice before I saw her, a soft, uncertain hey that froze me in place. When I turned, there she was, standing a few steps away, looking almost exactly the same, yet somehow different. There was a tension in her posture, a restlessness in her eyes, as if she had rehearsed this moment 100 times but still didn't know how to begin. My heart stumbled in my chest, confused between anger, longing, and an unexpected flicker of hope. She said she wanted to talk, her voice carrying a tremble she tried to hide. I didn't know whether to walk toward her or walk away. Part of me wanted to protect myself, to avoid reopening a wound that had barely started to close. But another part, the part that had once loved her so deeply it felt like breathing, couldn't ignore her presence. As she stood there, waiting for my response, 1,000 questions rose inside me, but none reached my lips. All I could feel was the weight of her return, the storm of emotions she brought with her, and the unsettling truth that no matter how much time had passed, her presence still shook something in me I thought I had buried. When she finally began to speak, her words came out soft and hesitant, carrying a mixture of uncertainty and something that felt suspiciously like regret. She wasn't the confident version of herself I remembered, the one who walked away without looking back. Instead, she looked fragile, almost conflicted, as though she was fighting with her own conscience. She talked about how things had changed for her, how she had been thinking, reflecting, realizing, but every sentence sounded incomplete, like she was carefully choosing what to say and what to hide. There was truth in her voice, but it was tangled with excuses, and I could feel the difference like a cold wind cutting through me. As I listened, something inside me shifted. Months ago, her words could have shattered me. But now, I heard them differently, not as confessions, but as pieces of a story she wasn't fully telling. It felt like she wasn't here because of love, but because of the loneliness that followed her after she left. That thought stung more than anything. Part of me had always believed that if she ever came back, it would be because she realized my value, because she missed the way I loved her. But standing there, hearing her speak in half-truths, I realized she wasn't returning for me, she was returning for the comfort she had once known. Every sentence she spoke felt like it carried a hidden meaning. The pauses, the deep breaths, the downward glances, they all hinted at something she wasn't admitting. And as much as I wanted to believe her, something inside me refused to be fooled again. I remembered the nights I spent breaking alone, the silence she left me in, the wounds I had stitched myself. Those memories stood between us like a wall I had never intended to build, but now realized I needed. Her presence stirred old emotions, yes, but not the ones she expected. Instead of longing, I felt clarity. Instead of weakness, I felt strength. I finally understood that the pain she left me with had taught me more about myself than her return ever could. And while she spoke, unaware of the storm inside me, I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't love trying to come back. This was my past testing me to see if I had truly healed, or if I would break the same way twice. I looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time, I wasn't seeing the girl I had loved, chased, fought for, or cried over. I was seeing someone from a life I had already walked out of. She stood there waiting, hoping, maybe expecting that I would open the door she had once closed on me without hesitation. But something inside me had changed. The version of me who would have begged, who would have compromised, who would have given up parts of himself just to keep her, he no longer existed. I had buried him in the months she was gone. She kept talking, trying to explain what she felt, what she realized, what she regretted. But her words floated around me without sinking in. I heard the sound, but not the meaning. It was as if my heart had put up a shield, refusing to absorb anything that could break it again. For the first time, I wasn't listening as someone in love, I was listening as someone who had survived. The pain had carved something steady inside me, something unshakable, something she had no power over anymore. A strange calm washed over me. Not anger. Not bitterness. Just clarity. I realized that closure wasn't something she could give me, it was something I had already found on my own. I didn't need her to apologize, justify, or rewrite what happened. The past didn't hurt the same way anymore, it just existed, like old scars that remind you where you've been but no longer define where you're going. So I took a step back, not out of fear, but out of certainty. I didn't argue. I didn't question. I didn't ask anything of her. I simply chose myself. And as I walked away, I understood something powerful. Some stories don't end when the love ends, they end when you finally return to yourself. And that day, I did.